multiple occasions about this, and she seemed to grok this pretty well. I think that Kucinich back in Ohio, he definitely was open to this as well. And I tell you, there haven't been a lot more. It's sad. Now maybe some are starting to get on board, but what they would generally say, I'm sure, is, well, we support clean energy. But again, what they're talking about is wind, solar, and biofuels. They are not aware of, or are not acknowledging, and certainly are not supporting actively the types of things that we're talking about here. And I saw you handling this little
I want to know what
device
this is.
here. Sure, what is this device? Well, what this is something called a sonofusion reactor. Sonofusion is a very fascinating, very elegant process for generating excess heat from a very simple reaction. There is an inventor named Roger Stringham who lives on the island of Kauai. And Roger is the pioneer of sonofusion, which is, some might consider a variant of the cold fusion technology, which some of the audience here might be familiar with. But what sonofusion does is it takes a special type of water called heavy water, which is common in seawater and is very inexpensive. And it pulses an ultrasonic frequency through that water and creates tiny little bubbles inside heavy water. When those bubbles implode, that means collapse, when those bubbles collapse, a very hot stream of high velocity gas called a plasma shoots out from that bubble and implants in a very thin piece of metal. Think of it like foil, almost like aluminum foil, but in this case would be made from different metals than aluminum. When that hot plasma jet impacts that foil, some of the hydrogen that's in that water fuses to form helium. It's an actual nuclear fusion reaction that happens at near room temperature.
And that's exactly what they'll use to shut you down. When they say nuclear, everybody says, whoa, nuclear,
well,
you can't mess with that.
Let me finish here before, before we go off to that. So what we find here with a process like this, and this is a small sonofusion reactor, in which case the amount of input electrical power to get the ultrasonic frequency generated takes about 15 watts of power. But the amount of thermal energy that's produced from the fusion reaction is about 40 watts. So we have almost a 3-to-1 excess energy from the output versus the input. That's called an over-unity reaction.
Well, there's another...
and you don't find that. You don't find that in the way we're generating power right now. Let me finish here for a second, John. So something like this little device, which is very real, it's been peer-reviewed by other physicists and chemists, and this is the only other one on this planet that is not at the inventor's shop itself. He was kind enough to give this to me as a show-and-tell device. But you could gang up 30 of these in a little block about the size of a coffee can, and that would provide 1 kilowatt of power as heat. And of course, heat is something that is a tremendous requirement from all of our energy, energy consumption, whether it's for hot water, for whether it's our factories, for actually transportation. Every internal combustion engine is actually a heat engine. So there's all kinds of possibilities for something like sonofusion. But here, Roger Stringham, the inventor of this process, when he applied for patent on this, he happened to reference cold fusion in the patent. He was denied patent just based on that. All right, here's a total breakthrough, totally real. I've seen it. You know, I've looked at all his experiments, and he's made incredible progress. But here's now this 80-year-old inventor living in a fair bit of isolation on Kauai. And when we do write about him in our book here as well, and he's not been able to generate the resources to not only continue his research, but to bring together a tiger team of young inventors, or at least young researchers with him, to advance the science. And that's desperately needed.
Thank you, Joel. I was trying to interject the fact that oftentimes Terminology is used to ridicule, which is one of the big things that have to, one of the conditions of change. At first it's ridiculed, and then it's violently opposed, and then it's accepted as being self-evident. You know, who said that? Was that Schopenhauer? Yeah, yeah. You know, there's some really smart people out there, folks, a lot smarter than I am. But what I do know is I'm getting tired of being misled. And what we're offering you to, on the November 11th is the real information, not a bunch. Right. Again, I started out by saying I'm not interested in smoke and mirrors. I'm one of the biggest skeptics on the planet. And it's taken me a long time to get the footing to figure out, and also the wherewithal to figure out how to navigate this sea of misinformation. So what I wanted to point out is when you start talking about over unity, and when you start talking about fusion, co-fusion, you know, imagine right as soon as we said that, one or two people, maybe more, left us because they're saying, "Oh, just a bunch of co-fusion kooks." That is exactly what those who would see this information further sequestered want you to think. They want you to think there's a bunch of kooks that are running this thing, and a bunch of kooks out there trying to sell you some snake oil. It ain't the truth. The truth is that we're here to tell you the truth for a change, because we believe that it's time for peace for a change, and I mean that with all my heart.
It's interesting, John, here, even like mentioning cold fusion, you know, 60 Minutes, the CBS 60 Minutes news program, last spring of 2000.